News has broken in the last couple of days about a case at Bath Spa University here in the UK who have allegedly placed a block on a master's student conducting research into so-called detransitioning. This is the process by which people who identify as transgender, in effect, desire to revert back to their assigned biological birth sex and reverse their initial decision to transition. The story first broke through an article in The Times on Saturday, that's the 23rd of September 2017, but has since been picked up by a number of other outlets including the BBC and The Independent. In essence, the story looks something like this. Master's student James Caspian submitted a proposal to an ethical approval committee at Bath Spa University as part of his course in counselling and psychotherapy. Caspian is himself reportedly a counsellor specialising in transgender therapy and wanted to look at the experiences of biological men who, after transitioning, wanted to reverse their decision. Now, this initial proposal was approved, but when Caspian found it difficult to find participants to take part in the research, he submitted an ethics amendment to widen his potential pool of participants to biological women who had transitioned to become male and then reversed their decision as well. Now, this amendment was rejected, which subsequently put a halt on the whole research project altogether. Now, in the decision letter that was leaked to the Times, it was suggested that engaging in potentially politically incorrect pieces of research carries a risk to the university, that attacks on social media may not be confined to the researcher but also may involve the university, and that the posting of unpleasant material on blogs or social media may be detrimental to the reputation of the university. Now, this was a letter that was submitted to Caspian by the subcommittee that was reviewing the ethics at Bath Spa University. For me, this seems to be the clearest example yet of the notion of forbidden knowledge rearing its head on British university campuses. That said, this isn't something that's new, that's just occurring now. When I was completing my own PhD, I was a student representative on an ethics subcommittee and found the same kinds of objections being raised in response to controversial research topics. Now, I was never aware of any research being stopped as a result of these debates within the committee, but they did lead to some quite picky responses or requests being made for lines to be added to information sheets or consent forms that were attached to sensitive research topics. So things like sexual offending, sexuality, and any sort of crime-related proposal had these requests attached to them. There are a couple of issues that need to be addressed here, though. Firstly, is the reputation of a research institution an ethical concern at all? Now, presumably, Caspian's research was reviewed by Bath Spa's Institute for Education, as this is the school that hosts the Counselling and Psychotherapy Practice Masters programme that's awarded by the institution. This might be one of the first problems. Had Caspian's research been reviewed by somebody with knowledge of the British Psychological Society's Code of Ethics, which arguably is the most appropriate code of conduct that's related to this research, they would see that the important factors at play here are participant treatment and researcher competence. And without having access to the proposal specifically, I can only assume that Caspian had the necessary paperwork in order to ensure that participants were properly briefed about the content of the study, had the right to withdraw, and weren't going to be deceived by any of the questions or tasks that were asked of them. That would indicate that the participant treatment box would be ticked straight away. In terms of researcher competence, Caspian is himself reportedly a counsellor with experience of treating individuals with issues related to their gender identity. Again, there shouldn't be any concerns here. He's clearly a competent figure to be acting in this kind of research role. Now, as a master's student as well, he would be under the supervision of a qualified member of academic staff, which also should play into the review process when committees are reviewing this kind of sensitive research topic. Now, the second issue that really needs to be addressed is, if this isn't an ethical issue that should be considered by the review panel, what drives this kind of decision? In essence, what this seems to come down to is perceived political pressure to not offend and to not investigate potentially controversial topics. Now, this is a flagrant denial of researchers' academic freedom and actually has the potential to cause long-term harm to people who struggle with their gender identity, even after transitioning. According to some experts in this area, for example Ray Blanchard, some 80% of people with gender dysphoria, which is the clinically diagnostic term applied to some people who identify as being transgender, desist over time. This means that around 8 in 10 people who report as being transgendered eventually come to identify as their biological sex. Caspian's own clinical practice highlighted a need to understand the experiences of people who changed their minds after transitioning. But on looking at the evidence about how to best treat these people, he found that no research existed. conducting such research has the potential to inform clinical practice involving these people and helps therapists to improve the lives of their patients. Forbidden knowledge is an ugly thing and something that shouldn't be an issue in higher education. Academic freedom is a cornerstone of our research institutions, and we can't allow political interference to dictate what is and is not an acceptable topic of study. And maybe I'm being particularly sensitive to this issue given my own personal research area, but if we allow non-academic pressures to judge what we can and cannot study, we risk scientific research in a number of vitally important areas, from health to crime to education, grind to a total halt. Now, I hope that Bath Spa will come to their senses on this and allow this research to take place. But if they don't, I really hope Caspian can find a more accommodating and open institution to complete this really important work.